we're live. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. Joe Moore here. And this is going to be a really fun episode. We have a surprise for you. I am joined today by Kyle Buller, Michelle Janikian, and David Drapkin. How you doing, David?
Lovely to be here. Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. You're the newest addition to the team, and we're really excited to have you. And this is our first podcast with you. I don't believe we've aired anything yet with you, but I expect to have a lot more.
Yeah, this is a dream come true. It's I've got lots to learn and lots to say. Really looking forward to it. Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, you got it. And Kyle, how's your day going?
Pretty good. Nice, hot, humid here in New Jersey. And David, I'm sure you're feeling that as well.
Yeah, well, I guess half of the team's in Jersey now. Yeah.
Excellent.
Good. Yeah, I hope y'all can get a little bit of respite from the heat. And Michelle, how's your day going in beautiful Mexico?
Good. There's a big thunderstorm rolling in, so you might hear a touch of that, but otherwise, lovely.
Good. You get some exciting weather there.
Every day is a journey.
Things are beautiful here in Colorado. I think it's about 70 or 80 degrees in Breckenridge. Cool. Before we dig in, introduce David, just a reminder to everybody, July 22, our next round of Navigating Psychedelics kicks off. It's going to be awesome. 8 weeks, 47 hours of material, 12 hours live contact time, CE available. And you can learn all about it over at psychedelicEducationCenter.com or psychedelicstoday.com. And just love to have you. There's a bunch of spots left, but it can sell out. We've sold out just about every one in the past. So be ready for that. And, why do this class? It gives you a solid foundation to understand the landscape from. It's like climbing up the crow's nest on a ship to see the shore. That's where I want to go. And we will help you figure out, all the different possible avenues, the different training options. Once you complete hours, different job options, all that kind of fun stuff, and give you a beautiful transpersonal framework and various other frameworks to help understand the experience. Cool. And if you want to help us out, leave a small monthly donation at patreon.com/psychedelics today, or leave us a review anywhere. And it could be Facebook, Google, iTunes, etc. We'd love it. And share it with a friend. Cool. All right, David, let's dig into you. You're a really interesting character and well sought after in the space. Mm-hmm. And so you've been a therapist for about 10 years, is that right, or more?
Yeah, I've been doing this kind of work probably 20 years, but real psychotherapy, 10 to 15 years. Got a private practice, worked in hospitals a lot. And my interest in psychedelics kind of goes way back. And then over the last couple of years, I guess part of the renaissance is seeing that this is actually going to become a mainstream treatment. It doesn't need to be something in the underground, that it really deserves to kind of be in the toolbox, to be at the table. So I've been looking for about 6 months, having different interviews. And when I did the interview with the course with Navigating Psychedelics, it was the day that I kind of literally told my company that I was going to be leaving. It took a while, and I turned down some jobs in the more kind of corporate drug development, other kinds of roles, because I really had a good feel with what you're building here at Psychedelics Today.
Yeah. And you had some really compelling visions and some serious passion that communicated over to us. And that's kind of a big reason why we wanted you. It's like, oh, this guy has some serious vision. Gonna need him. And here you are. And thank goodness for that. And can you say anything about your experience with us in that class that you joined us for? Like, I'm sure you knew about us from before, but you jumped into our class and you got to know us quite well.
Yeah, one of the main takeaways for me was realizing that this is going to be a lifelong learning journey. Even though 8 weeks was a great commitment, and there's tons of interviews, videos, articles on the learning platform that I got access to. One of my main takeaways was just this is lifelong. So Navigating Psychedelics is just exactly what I needed to, one, reassure me that I am doing the right thing in turning down my my old job and wanting to leave and work in the psychedelic space. So it totally reinforced that, and I felt validated and gave me a sense of what kind of therapist I want to be in this space. And so there's so many different ways to work in this field. We can write articles, we can be a trainer, we can be involved more in the kind of the business and operations side of it, and that is definitely the side that I'm going to go down, as well as being a therapist too. And I really loved, and it was important to me, to not just get the kind of academic, medical, clinical stuff. That's all amazing, and I can totally geek out on that. I love it. But I wanted to get a richer feel for it, like what's underneath, what's the deeper layers of this. So the whole Grothian transpersonal piece, as well as the more kind of indigenous traditions as well. And it was also really important for me for the work that we're doing to be connected to the kind of bigger social picture around decrim and ensuring access to treatment for psychedelics, so that it's not extractive capitalism taking over. So I definitely feel like I found my crew of people and the kind of right voice and the right platform to try and build this ecosystem out. This is an opportunity that can't be missed. So really want to work with everyone here. This is sacred work and kind of humbling work, the shoulders that we're standing on. So looking forward to the good work together, that's for sure.
Oh, thank you, David. Beautiful. And quick kind of mundane question, but are those toucans on your shirt?
They are toucans. Yes.
Very nice.
Yes.
I love it.
I need some more bird shirts in my life.
Yeah, I've got a few. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Do you like my shirt?
All right,
Joe?
cool. You got a bird shirt on? Great.
No, I have a weed leaf shirt on.
Oh, weed leaf. That's
I'm
excellent.
a little less professional over here.
I only have mushroom shirts. I don't have any pot leaf shirts.
Yeah,
It's great.
All
right, cool. Let's dig in. So beautiful article. Where did we find it? Cell.com. This new psilocybin article getting a ton of press about what's the title? Psilocybin induces rapid and persistent growth of dendritic spines in frontal cortex in vivo. So in vivo, in living animals, frontal cortex, front part of the brain, dendritic spines. So these are dendrites are typically the receptor part of the nerve, right? So we're getting kind of thicker and richer dendrites. I can't help having like a hair analogy here. Thicker and richer and new dendritic spines, right? Like what were some of your takeaways, folks? Maybe Kyle, we can start with you.
Yeah, this was really interesting. And I think, might kind of point to why psilocybin has therapeutic potential. I'm really not great with some of the neuroscience and brain imaging stuff. So I think we chatted about getting somebody on here to chat more high level about that to really help explain it to us. But, just reading through here was really exciting. So, just part of the abstract here, psilocybin is a serotonergic psychedelic with untapped therapeutic potential. Here we chronically imaged applicable dendritic spines on layer 5 primordial neurons and mouse medial frontal cortex. We found that a single dose of psilocybin led to a 10% increase in spine density and spine head width. Synaptic remodeling occurred quickly within 24 hours and was persistent 1 month later. That's really exciting. And I think that also kind of points to the long-term effects here, which, we're also kind of seeing in some of the research. Like when we look at the Hopkins research, people are still finding benefit long-term. What was it? Up to 12 to 15 months after their session. So the results demonstrate structural plasticity that may underpin psilocybin's long-lasting beneficial actions.
It's a big deal. It's a really big deal. I think this is the best kind of neurogenesis study we've seen yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. And David, what kind of takeaways did you have from this thing?
I love articles like this. Anything kind of academic, especially if it's in PDF format, it just does something to me. So this was great. It really it made me think of Robin Carhart Harris, who's obviously leaving London for San Francisco soon. His rebus model, So rebus meaning relaxed beliefs under psychedelics. So having worked with patients with depression for so long, and having depression myself, one of the key experiences of being depressed is this kind of neurovegetative, kind of slovenly, negative funk, physically, mentally, emotionally. So we spoke about this before. What psilocybin does here is saying it's kind of like fertilizer for your brain. It literally helps the brain to regrow to where it used to be before depression kind of made it shrivel up. So it helps it not only just to grow, to become more expansive and have kind of greater potential, but it also helps the connections to flow. So that's why they speak about elevated excitatory neurotransmission. So there's that kind of interconnectivity, and we all know that famous diagram that's used with the two circles, with the colored lines that show the connectivity, as a placebo and then with psilocybin. That the amount of connectivity, with psilocybin to kind of get the brain working again is remarkable. So I really feel like it gets the brain back to where it used to be before depression, and that's what a lot of these psychedelics do, that neuroplastic window, kind of neurogenesis, as you said. And there was one other piece that really spoke to me. I don't know if you guys scrolled down to the bottom, but there was a picture of a mouse in a box, and it used the term learned helplessness. And I feel like we all have this, well, we don't, but some of us have this experience of learned helplessness, and we can call that depression. We could call that kind of being kind of adapting to society and culture as well as this learned helplessness. How can I change society or my own life? And it's a bit like being a mouse in a box. So what they're showing here is that the mice that had the psilocybin, they were able to overcome this learned helplessness of being in this box. So I feel like with where we're holding in life right now, this, it speaks to how we deal with the environmental stresses that we're dealing with in life. And going back to Robin Carhart Harris's rebus model, it kind of speaks to that concept of entropy and anarchy of the brain and adaptability to life situations, making us more resilient and flexible to deal with life being tough.
What I've seen largely is that this idea of neurogenesis we haven't made the full link yet to improvements, behavioral improvements, psychological improvements. So like we're close, I think. This is, I think, the closest we've come in terms of a really good looking study in living animals, not just on, petri dishes. And hopefully this trend continues. Michelle, anything on your side on this article?
Yeah, I mean, I find it really fascinating. Obviously, I guess like we talked a little bit before we started recording about like how there are theories of how like depression might actually be like a result or like part of the process of depression in the brain is that these dendrites are less active, right? And they shrivel in a way, kind of like what David was talking about. And that's perhaps how psilocybin, works in this way. I also think that it's kind of interesting, like thinking about the subjective psilocybin experience and like how you feel the day after, a week after. And it also reminds me, we released an interview between Court Wing and Robin Carhart Harris just a couple of weeks ago in the blog, and I edited the Q&A, so I spent a lot of time with it. And Court goes into this really interesting description of how his depression was relieved or how he felt after his experience in a psilocybin trial here in America. And he describes it as feeling lighter, like the depression was this heavy burden that he was carrying around with him every day that just weighed down his thoughts, his actions, like just everything. And after a really, a pretty high dose, because he was in a psilocybin study, I think it's equivalent to like 8 grams of synthetic psilocybin, he felt lighter and he could just like move through the world more easily and get stuff done and feel things without, guilt or shame and this kind of action. And I've definitely experienced that. And so I really like related to that aspect of his interview, and this made me think of that too. Like there's this sense kind of like on psilocybin, but more like right after, where things just like make sense, you know? Like for me, it's very much like my history makes sense. Everything just kind of like makes sense, and I can see it more clearly, and then I can take that experience and use it to my benefit in the days and weeks and months after. So it's really fascinating to me how this is relating to the neuroscience of it, like my personal experience, and now seeing some of the pieces come together of like maybe what's happening in my brain chemistry. You know, we're still figuring it out, and I do want to talk to an expert on this a little in more depth before I totally botch the neuroscience of it all. But it's really exciting, and it does seem to start, like I keep saying, to make sense. So I'm really excited about that.
Mm-hmm.
If I can jump in, I'd say that, you know, what Michelle's saying there and what this article's saying is integration is really important too. So psilocybin had this benefit for at least a month, they're saying. And, you know, what the research shows is sometimes people with major depressive disorder do need to kind of come back for more psilocybin after 2 to 3 months, some of the times. But once we have these experiences, we come back to ourselves, we feel lighter, we feel more positive, and, you know, we can kind of feel better for longer. The more integration we do, the more kind of understanding we have about what do I do with my life and how do I live things so that this experience kind of becomes a little bit more permanent or lasts just a little bit longer.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of what I mean. And I feel like I keep saying this on the podcast, so I'm trying not to repeat myself week after week, but like, yeah, once I do see myself more clearly, right? And I see things and things just make sense in that experience and like on the come down and the day after, then I can start to make changes, right? I can start like to see like, well, actually it wasn't serving me to do this, or, you know, like, I don't know, things sort of just come together. Like maybe parts of my brain are talking to each other, and I start to see things from a new perspective, and that therefore I can, my integration is often making changes or being more active, being more social and community based. I can be a bit of an introvert, and that keeps me kind of in my depressive rut. I don't have the, you know, new experiences that are kind of like helping my brain make new connections in just everyday world, and really like other people help so much with that. And it just can be easy to be like, oh, sure, I know that, but I have all this work to do, which doesn't involve other people. So let me stay in front of my desk and like write all these social media captions or whatever. But, you know, finding a balance is another thing I keep repeating. Yeah. But a balance between all the things you got to get done, including maybe you want to consider this like self-care, but like integration is very much something I got to make time for and it has to be like an active choice every time, which is kind of why it's a lot of work and a pain in the butt. But it's like sometimes I see things that I'm doing when I'm in the experience of psilocybin, and then when I come out of it, I realize like, well, I have to make this active choice to act differently like every time this arises, and that's a lot of work, but it's worth it. Just wanted to dig into integration for a second, I suppose.
Yeah, there's this. Yeah, no, I mean, this is coming up for me too, and this was actually a question that a student brought up last week. Like, what is like the best integration time window, like after, taking a psychedelic? And so I think having data like this can help us like kind of understand that, the process, might still continue to be open a month later. So I think they said they imaged 34 days after psilocybin was administered. And they observed that a fraction of the psilocybin-induced new spines remained stable.
Cool.
So it's really interesting.
So would you... sorry. Continue, David.
I was just going to say those mice did some pretty good integration work. If after 34 days their dendritic spines were still kind of enlarged and more solid.
Yeah, I guess
I wonder what a fraction means. I wonder how much that actually is.
I wonder if that speaks to like the importance of actively integrating in that first month too. Like, because I do feel like even after 2 weeks for me, that really exciting feeling that I feel like, oh, I fucking figured it out, I got this, like wears off. And I am integrating like so hard, clearly all the time. But like that really kind of like afterglow, like depression-free feeling can subside. And so I wonder if there is like, if we should really consider this window as a time to be doing like a lot of work. Maybe if you were really depressed and you went and got psilocybin therapy, like maybe you work part-time that month. So you have a lot of time to, like, if you could afford it, which I know is like such a privilege, but like, maybe you really need to dedicate a lot of time in that month to integration, because that feeling does wear off. And I think a lot of us are kind of at risk to fall back in those ruts if we're not actively participating in the process. Just a thought, food for thought.
Totally. Yeah, Michelle, you're pretty spot on, right? Like, if you don't practice, do you get any better? So this conversation reminded me of the intro for the Psychedelics Salon. This lady I used to chat with a lot online was the voice there. And it's, I think, a paraphrase of Ralph Waldo Emerson. The quote from Emerson is, "The mind, once stretched by a new idea, never returns to its original dimensions." So you have these new pathways, you just have to kind of exercise them.
Yeah.
And that's where this integration topic might be taking place. Yeah.
What do you guys think? Was transcendentalism really inspired by psychedelics? Yay or nay?
It was the interface. I think this is when the Hindu kind of scriptures became really available, really available.
In
and
America.
It was the interface of this kind of American new intellectual tradition in America interfacing with this new content. That's how I phrase it or think about it. Wildly influential in Whitehead, William James. Thank goodness for William James, and many others. We really need to do a series on James at some point.
And I think Whitehead, as we keep mentioning him, I think it also just like, I want to do some more blog posts and stuff like dissecting these philosophical issues, because I think as we're talking about it, I don't know, I just like to provide more resources for folks to fully understand this aspect of it.
Yeah. Totally.
Anyway.
And do psychedelics instantiate philosophical crises? And what do you do with it once you get there? And are you getting sucked in by some sort of Chizo cult, or are you going into some sort of tradition that has depth and longevity? And where are you going? What are you up to? Is it worth it? Are the people at the top where you want to be in life in the future? Who knows? A lot of questions to ask. No real answers for you. Though, what was the guy's name? Matthew Remski, Kyle. He did the Conspirituality podcast. Yeah. We had him on to talk about cults a while back and cult dynamics, aka high demand groups. Because not like just about any religion you could call it cult, right? But it's the high demand aspect that really makes it problematic. Get rid of your family, all that kind of fun stuff. Don't talk to your friends anymore.
I'm just thinking, sorry, I laughed just because I'm thinking of Tim and Eric, zone theory. Rule number 1, discard bios. Discard your parents.
Oh my God. Yeah. If you want to be successful like them. Yeah, the zone theory stuff is so funny. It's just a make-believe comedy cult. It's great stuff. But cults are super real and they're out there, folks. So stay aware. And there's actually measures you can use to analyze groups that you might get involved with. I forget what it's called, but there's some really good kind of tools you can use to pin that down. So, all right, next up, more fun. Blood pressure goes up. Marijuana moment. This is by Ben Adlin. Title, DEA says cancer patients' requests for medical psilocybin could fuel a legal drug market. Oh my God. All right. So the DEA had some really interesting things to say about this. Is this at the federal level? It's at the 9th Circuit Court, where a particular attorney general argues on the behalf of the DEA that the court lacks jurisdiction on this idea, and that this federal right to try act that we've talked about a bunch doesn't include substances on the Controlled Substances Act. I think that's really weird, but I get it. It's complicated. But the DEA is trying to stay relevant, and I think they're feeling a little bit of lack of control. If I want to project onto a big monster institution, right? So not only are all these organizations trying to get religious exemptions, but you're seeing medical exemptions come through quite regularly. Though, I don't know if everybody remembers this, but around the time of the Denver decriminalization bill, there was a psychiatrist that did prescribe psilocybin to a terminal cancer patient. The person had to source it on their own, but they had a prescription, which theoretically would hold up in federal court. But this argument in this article could mean it's not really that certain. All right, Michelle, it sounds like you're excited about this one. Let's see what you got to say.
Yeah, I mean, this is like not surprising from the DEA, right? Like, I think you might be onto something. Like, it does kind of feel like we have a really big shift in like drug policy and the culture around drug use in the US. And so I think the DEA is kind of like putting its foot down to be like, not so fast, psychonauts. Like, what is going on in this country? It's a little disappointing. So, like, I think we all assume that the Right to Try Act did protect folks' right to use controlled substances at the end of their life. And this is a case of, I think, 2 cancer patients and a physician in Seattle, who brought this to court. And so the DEA, what they did was they basically like wrote a letter to the judge asking them to dismiss or deny the case in a brief. It was filed, I think, like a week and a half ago. And the reason is mainly like that a Schedule I substance can't be used in Right to Try. The other 2 reasons were that the DEA would be powerless, this is a quote, to prevent an unscrupulous doctor from obtaining Schedule I substances from an unregistered manufacturer. Like what? Picking them in nature? I'm sorry, but it's mushrooms. And then the other point that they made in this letter is basically to prevent a black market from growing, like an illegal underground psychedelic market from growing, which is like already happening in the US. Like, if I'm being honest, I was only there for a month and it was like really easy to get psychedelics for the first time ever. And so that's their main reasonings, which is like understandable. Like when you really consider like what context they're coming at it from. But I mean, I think the next step is really defunding the DEA. So maybe they're just like holding on to a lifeline here. But apparently the 2 petitioners, the 2 patients, have an oral argument scheduled for September 2nd. So I think, I haven't done any reporting on this, but it looks like they'll fight this, or at least, not, let this letter from the DEA essentially stop them from continuing this process. But it definitely will put a big, like, what's the expression, put the brakes on the Right to Try exemptions, it seems like. So, I mean, it's interesting. I don't know. Anyone have any thoughts, David or Kyle?
I'm just kind of curious, and I don't know if we know like how the DEA has like kind of reacted to like Oregon's initiative, and just thinking about like, I know it's a bit different because it was a like state, initiative, but yeah, I don't know, it just got me curious the way that they're responding to something like this, and maybe it's different because it's medical, and they don't want people to go out and get it from the underground market or start cultivating it. But yeah, it just, I don't know, it had me starting to wonder. I wonder if there is going to be pushback or any challenges that the DEA presents as manufacturing, cultivation starts to emerge in the Oregon landscape to provide a medical treatment, right?
Such a good question.
David.
Yeah, I have a whole host of thoughts. I'll see if I can put them down in order. So yeah, look, we're talking about people here that are terminally ill. So this is not recreational use. This is not decrim. This is people that are terminally ill. So this is kind of palliative care. And having worked in hospitals, I've specialized in addiction as well. So, I know about medications that are legal in that they're not on that kind of Schedule I, and they caused 90,000 deaths in America last year, and they are called opioids. They're not called psilocybin. So the whole idea of this scheduling system it really doesn't make sense anymore when we think about it from just an objective empirical sense. And, I think we all appreciate the work of David Nutt with his kind of little spectrum of lethality and that shows, psilocybin, LSD, MDMA are really low down on the addictive risk and the kind of the biomedical risk compared to opioids and alcohol, for example. So the whole scheduling system just really hasn't caught up with science. The more clinical trials that we have, the better. The more legal cases like this, the better. And I really appreciate the work of Catherine Tucker from Emerge Law Group. So she's the petitioner in this case, and she really has done a lot of work around the right to try. And the whole right to try, from what I understand as a non-legal person, is nothing else works. There are some kind of anecdotal or preliminary trials into these other medications that haven't been fully approved yet. But there's anecdotal evidence that they may well work, and the person has all that information and has consented to treatment, so let them try it. This is kind of palliative care, really. And I know Canada's a few steps ahead on this one, and Health Canada has opened up, I think, a study into it, or has granted at least 4 people on palliative care to use psychedelics, and Therasil has been involved in that piece. So I just think we really need to kind of cut the politics out of this. And I can't believe in the year 2021, the laws of Nixon, God bless him, are still impacting people today that, are really ill and nothing else is working. And there's research looking at the psilocybin, for example, that shows it's kind of groundbreaking, fast-tracked by the FDA. The DEA's kind of got to catch up with this fast tracking as well. Maybe the DEA should fast track their reclassifying of controlled substances.
Yes. Oh my God, please.
It's a weird idea, right? Like, because that's their lifeblood in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And it was never based on science. It was a race war. And it's still 50 years later plus is still a race war, the foundation of race war. And people are suffering in and outside of this race war. So, I never thought we'd say God bless Nixon, but I like that though. In the U.S. South, it's a bless his heart. It's like it's a pretty dire insult in some parts of the South. So I'll take it that way. Anyway, it's amazing, right, David? Like, how do we justify like this racist policy with people dying in incredible pain? Yeah. Like, is there a contrast here? And are we okay with America being this slow relative to other countries? Like Canada, thankfully, doesn't get too much U.S. subsidy, I don't think. So, they can do this stuff. Whereas I remember reading Israel was a little nervous about kind of breaking these rules a while ago when they really wanted to do MDMA research. They were nervous that the U.S. is going to pull funding. And it's like, how can this even be the case at this point in history when we have this data? Science should be a little bit liberated from politics. But, if we look at climate change, it's not true. And not true in drugs either.
And birth control as well, seeing how that's been politicized in America, which is, again, very obscure. And in England, the medicinal cannabis is very slow. So there's been a lot of media attention for people, particularly young people with very acute autism spectrum disorder. You can't really medicate that unless you knock someone out with meds. But what they found is some strains of cannabis can really help people, with epilepsy and other disorders. So there's really been a lot of pressure for the laws to change in England. And one thing that this article also made me think about, and I feel like we should mention it if you feel like jumping in, the situation that's been happening this week with the sprinter, I think her name is Sha'Carri Richardson, and this campaign to let her run. And they announced today, the American Olympic Association, that actually then she hasn't been selected in the team, so she's not going to be going to the Olympics because she smoked a joint of cannabis because her mum died. And she didn't want to get drunk. She didn't want to use opioids. She, smoked a joint to help her deal with that. And in a lot of America, that is a completely legal thing to do. Here in New Jersey, if I wanted to, in theory, I could smoke a joint and that would be fine. And it's not a substance that improves her performance. It's not performance enhancing. So it's really kind of, you're preventing someone who's an amazing figurehead for America, and particularly the African American community. She's awesome. She's not going to the Olympics because her mum died and she smoked a joint. So where's the law and where's the kind of evidence and where's that kind of logic coming from, I wonder?
Where's the leadership? Do you remember that St. Joe Biden said recently, the rules are the rules in regards to this case, and it's like disgusting. And I just can't really get over his kind of resistance on cannabis policy and his unseeing of the race issues. Like, just don't seem fair. Like Carl Hart, if you watch Carl Hart's socials, it's incredible the amount of commentary he's had on this particular issue. And we've got to keep improving because this is not okay. I remember watching that race on TV somewhere. Don't usually watch sports on TV, but I was like, oh, this is cool. 100 meter. Love 100 meter. I used to love it in high school. Like, let's see what these folks are doing. These ladies were crushing, and she won that race. And I'm like, this is cool. Like her like whole aesthetic, like how psyched she was, how professional she seemed. Like, this is amazing. And, you know, to perform at that level in this day and age, you have to be so focused.
21 years old.
Well, and, you know, did champions smoke cannabis? Michael Phelps didn't get this much shit. In fact, he was included, I think, after the cannabis situation, right? And I think there were a number of other big athletes that got outed as being, you know, best in breed and cannabis users. It's ridiculous. So we just need to get over this. And I'm sorry for more politics, folks, but the drug war, we need to get over it. No more drug war. That's the chant. It's not serving us. It's in fact hurting us and slowing down our psychedelic renaissance as well. I want to go on a 40-minute tangent right now because I know let's plan for it for next week. But I know Christian Angermeyer and Rick Doblin had a debate recently, and I saw Vine Ventures kind of live tweeting it. And there's some really good talk tracks in there, mostly on Rick's side. And I think it's something we should highlight. And I would love to actually talk to Rick about this. So I'm gonna, Rick, we're coming for you. Hope to get you on the podcast soon so we can dig in on this because it's an incredibly complicated topic, and it's actually a great transition into our next article here from our lovely friends at Vice on Motherboard. Shayla Love wrote this one. Title: Can LSD treat food allergies? We don't know, but it's already been patented. Subtitle: Companies can own potentially valuable psychedelic IP without anyone even knowing if it works. So is this good? Is this bad? One of my favorite questions around IP: how many lives have been saved by IP and how many lives have been lost by IP? Fascinating. I don't have any answer. I haven't really spent the time to really think that through, but just on the face of it, you know that there's some stuff going on there because people die all the time from not being able to afford meds, and the meds are only expensive due to IP. You can get the counterfeit stuff in China for $10, but you'd prefer to die. It's incredible to me. Anyway, more politics, right? So this article came out July 1. And it starts off with a story about Dr. Andy Weil saying on CBS in 2001 that LSD cured his lifelong cat allergy. He's had a number of pronouncements like this. And it's one of the reasons too, why I like Andy Weil. Yeah. He's saying stuff about sunburns and like his, I forget if it was hearing and vision with him, but there was some other fun stuff. And, you know, he's good buddies with Paul Stamets, and Paul Stamets says his stutter was cured by psilocybin. I think that it's kind of a weird paraphrase. Psilocybin assisted his body curing his stuttering, or, you know, there's all sorts of ways to phrase this different, but let's go at this one. Michelle, I want to start with you on this one because you found it. But what do you think about this article?
Well, I thought the article did a really good job explaining some, aspects of basic patent law that I did not know, because I didn't realize you could patent something before, like, the studies had proven that it's possible, like in this case. And so that's like what Shayla uses this example as the LSD food allergy cure, kind of as like her example driving this piece. Like, so perhaps it's patentable because no one else has done it, but perhaps it's not because like actually folks have done it, like Andrew Weil talking about it. And if you go into Reddit, there's threads on this and things like that. And so like she really explains really well on like what is patentable, especially in the psychedelic space, and what isn't. And then like kind of the little loopholes, like it really depends on, the person at the patent office, and then folks who, get one kind of wishy-washy patent through will go to that same patent officer for all of their wishy-washy patents. And that's how some of these psychedelic companies are starting to patent stuff that like is questionable, basically. And so I thought it did a really good point of explaining that, because I didn't really have a firm grasp on that. But beyond that, I mean, I think it's just really interesting because there is a patent grab going on right now. We talked about it a few months ago in other articles that Shayla wrote that really helped us understand like what was happening with Christian Angermeyer and like Compass Pathways, for instance, who are on this mission to passion, like to patent like every little aspect of like possible psychedelic cures and medicine and stuff before we have the research to prove it. And I also liked how this article ended with like, if you do have a lethal food allergy, like please don't try this. Like don't take LSD and then eat peanuts and think it's going to work, because we don't have the research to prove it yet. And this could be dangerous though. Like once it's in the mainstream, people with shellfish and nut allergies, thinking, well, just dose and then eat and see what happens. Like, no, please don't do that. Like, I think that there's definitely something to be said about allergies and psychedelics. It's probably more of like some kind of psychosomatic autoimmune thing than actually like the LSD compound curing whatever causes like your allergy. Like, I don't know. I think it's probably a little more psychological than that. But yeah, I think folks should check out this article. It also made me think that maybe we should start patenting a bunch of stuff. Which is like not the way to read this article, but I was like, what's like a novel thing that we could just start patenting? But yeah.
Well, if you look at Paul Stamets, he patented his like multiple of these microdosing stacks.
Yeah.
And his intention was to just make sure nobody else patented it.
So he could make money. You can
have a patent strategy around locking these things up and essentially putting them in some sort of like private trust or something. Well, so there are avenues.
The other problem with that though, and it's not a good way to go if you're listening and also passionate about the psychedelic renaissance, like this will actually block research. So if you patent, and the article does a good job explaining this as well, like if you patent a bunch of stuff like, I don't know, LSD for PMS cramps or something, then no one can actually do the research on that because it could be an infringement of your patent, so with all of these new patents arising with Compass Pathways and all that kind of thing, the problem is like, then anyone who actually like universities or people without like a capitalist drive to do the research on these issues could be stopped because it would be a patent infringement. And that's kind of where our like American capitalist like free for all kind of is incompatible with scientific research, like in a non-biased way that just like actually promotes understanding of things. And so it's a really interesting and kind of tricky topic that I did want to bring a little light to in this conversation. I wonder what the rest of you think.
Happy you brought all that up. David, I think we're going to jump to you.
You got it. So this is something that I feel strongly about as well. I guess I should introduce myself to more of an extent. So I used to be an economist. I was studying economics, and I'll probably speak more about my near-death experience, like Kyle has spoken a lot. So at the age of 21, I was electrocuted and nearly died, and literally the next day went on a spiritual adventure that hasn't finished yet. And I decided not to go into economics because I thought about it. God, is this really, am I okay with this, how some of these companies act? And so I still retain this very healthy cynicism about capitalism, particularly the version of it that has evolved over the last 50 years since Reagan and Thatcher. So capitalism in itself isn't bad. There's also a word in America that people are very scared of called socialism.
Whoa.
Hey,
yeah.
buddy.
Kidding.
You're going to watch me back, are you? So in Europe, socialism is a reality. It's not a scary thing. It's kind of part of the fabric of society, and it's how, we manage budgets and taxes and develop public services. But it's kind of evolved with capitalism in a kind of, in that kind of tension. So with intellectual property, really this is, it's a land grab. It's a way for kind of marking territory. It's kind of like going to the moon and putting a flag on it and saying, this is ours now.
Who would do
but
that?
In this case, the moon doesn't exist yet. So they're trying to put these flags down on planets, to use the analogy, that don't yet exist. And they may not exist. But if they do, they want to own it. And I think it's just not right. Particularly when we're looking at medications that, targeting some pretty difficult disorders. So eating disorders are very, very hard to treat. Not many medications can work with them. Psychotherapy can often backfire with eating disorders. And we normally tell therapists, unless you've been trained to work with eating disorders, don't really say anything about it because you can make it worse.
Wow.
And eating disorders actually have the highest percentage of mortality rates, of the greatest probability of death compared to, say, bipolar or even schizophrenia or depression. So it's a very, very difficult condition to work with. So the fact that they're trying to basically own it and block it, even though they've done no work into it, they have not even described what they intend to do. They're not experts in it. It's just pie in the sky. And I think, I wanted to mention Mason Marks, and he's the lead person at Poplar. So Poplar's going to be at Harvard University, and they've developed this project on psychedelic law and integration. And it's going to be part of the Petrie Flom Center for Health Law Policy, Biotechnology and Bioethics at Harvard, as I said. So they've been given a couple million by Tim Ferriss, thanks Tim, to really have a voice in the community that is going to say, this is what's going on right now around IP, and to kind of call things out. I hope that's what you're going to be doing, Mason, to kind of raising awareness about some of this land grabbing and to kind of reconcile that with intellectual property law, and I hope with drug policy as well. And I also wanted to mention Porta Sophia, and that was mentioned in the article, David Casimir, and how that's kind of an open access repository for psychedelic intellectual property, or kind of art, as they call it. So there are good forces out there, and the question of who's going to win, well, we need to find out. So we really need to give money to kind of give credit and to kind of really advocate for this isn't a done deal. So we can have influence right now around the way that the whole psychedelic ecosystem and regulations and policy and insurance reimbursement develops over the next 10 years. But we've got to raise our voices. So yeah, it's really important work. If you want, over to you.
Yeah, brings up some interesting questions just about ownership and who really owns this stuff. So like thinking about did this person just find this out from Andrew Weil? Listening to a podcast and then deciding to put a patent down. They said here, Marx found a paper that was originally published in 1965 that described the potential use of LSD for allergies. Who owns stuff when it's out there in the public, right? Going to forums and just looking at what people are reporting. And yeah, I mean, we could even just bring this back from the indigenous lens of hey, what about people that have been using this knowledge for decades, centuries, millennia? And who gives it the right? Yeah, who gives you the right to own this data or this knowledge all of a sudden and to profit off of it? Just because, I guess you're just kind of being able to use the patent as a way to do that. So I don't know. Yeah, it's just interesting to think about who owns knowledge. How do you own that? And who gives you the right to do so in that way and to profit off of it?
And just to like file a patent is like an expensive process that you need some kind of expertise to do, right? And so that kind of makes it quite limited on who could even do it at all. Am I wrong in thinking that? Like, I have no idea how to go about filing a patent. If I have an original idea, it'll probably just get lost in the wind because I didn't go patent it because I don't have all those resources. I don't know. That's just how I think about it, especially in terms of like indigenous
access
communities.
to expensive lawyers.
Yeah, like this is LSD, so it's different. But if it was psilocybin, like, yeah, then there might be some issues. Like, I wonder if there's ever been a ceremony in Oaxaca where someone's food allergy was cured by a mushroom ceremony. Wouldn't that make it intellectual property of like, the indigenous communities who then gave that ceremony? So,
what's the phrasing? They call that prior art. Is there prior art there?
But how could you even find
and
that?
If it happened outside the U.S., is it valid?
Ooh.
Totally.
Yeah.
We've had Michael. I forget if we were allowed to say this person's name, but we did a whole episode on patents. Mike or Michael. But you can look in our podcast backlog to get a patent attorney's opinion on how all this stuff kind of works, and how to understand it, because it's so alien to us that it's not something that we can comfortably understand. In that kind of debate I was referencing with Doblin and Christian Angermeyer from, what is he with the tie?
And Compass
the
as well,
idea is that Doblin said, like, we literally have an anti-patent strategy, and Christian Angermeyer is saying, well, it's good for the movement to have these patents. I'm like, I don't know that it is. And he's kind of like pushing back against legalization. So of course I'm going to have some issues with that. But, this is a longer debate. Like, is legalization going to impact business? Is it going to impact, and business being this stuff getting approved by FDA and covered by insurance, or being free and covered by national health care in other countries? We don't know yet. TBD. It depends on how extraordinary the results are and how cheap it is. And can we convince regulators that this is a better choice than Paxil or whatever else? So I feel like I demonize Paxil all the time. You're not exceptional, Paxil. You're just in the herd. It's an easy one for me to remember. But it's a big deal. Like, how do we balance this idea of actual novel inventions versus just patenting stuff from the history? This is what got Compass in a lot of heat with most of the community. You're going to, seriously, guys, you're going to patent soft furniture, or attempt to, and hi-fi audio systems and hand-holding. Like, I could say some really rude things right now, but I won't. Save it for next episode. But it's, why would you expect to have friends after making moves like that? It's not great. And, this is a traditional corporate strategy, right? It's like exploring what the patent office will and will not accept. And you're just you've got gazillions of dollars to throw at lawyers to do this stuff. So why wouldn't you, I guess? The way to gain trust back would be if there was some sort of public open source trust and you transferred ownership of those patents there once you're awarded those patents. So all this stuff was them filing patents, right? It wasn't that they were awarded patents for handholding. It's very different. So Doblin's like, it's just a race for who has the most lawyers. Yeah. To like patent all this shit.
And to monopolize their little corner of the industry, right? So then no one else can, be providing that kind of therapy, or they'll need their license or whatever. It's just an effort to make as much money as possible. It's not an effort to bring this medicine to as many people as possible or anything altruistic whatsoever. In my opinion, that's how it looks.
A couple of things I'll add. One really interesting piece in this article is the entity filing for the patent isn't a drug development company. I think it's Palo Alto, aren't they? An kind of psychedelic investment company. So that in itself, I think,
or a tech company if it's based in Palo Alto. Yeah, probably. Yeah. It's like the home of Silicon Valley.
And I'm thinking, there's this concept of public goods as well. So the water and the air are public goods. They don't belong to anyone. And can psilocybin mushrooms belong to anyone other than humanity? Yeah. And I think that's an interesting question that we can ask drug development companies. You're developing, for example, Compass Pathways. They have this kind of synthetic crystallized version of psilocybin, COMP360. How do they feel about decrim? People still eating mushrooms in safe and responsible ways. Should that be legal, or should there be, for example, the Oregon model of their kind of psilocybin service centers? I think they're going to be called, which I don't think are going to be tied down to any one COMP360 pill. No. It could well be, different mushrooms that grow from the ground and are harvested, it can be used there. So if these companies are saying, no, that shouldn't be allowed, why is that?
Yeah.
Because they've invested all this money in patents. And I've got this little picture in my head of these lawyers and drug development companies with two Rolodexes. One of them's flicking through and they're just choosing a compound. Oh, MDMA. Oh, LSD. Oh, ibogaine. And then another Rolodex is saying, eating disorders or depression or anxiety. And they're literally just going to flick through everyone using algorithms and AI, file a patent, hundreds and hundreds of patents with every possible ramification. This could be for children or for obesity or for geriatrics or for pain, for LSD. And so really is that fair? How do they deserve to own that? The answer is no, in my opinion.
Same.
Yeah, and I think Compass has thrown opposition against Oregon. So I wonder if they are feeling a little nervous and scared that, new models could emerge and, maybe they're not getting all their potentially ROI on their investments and patents that they're trying to put out there.
They're already so rich. I don't understand why they need more money. Am I just so far out of this world that I just don't get it at all? But whatever.
How long have you been living in Mexico?
7 years. Yeah. I'm just I just don't care about money.
You've started to detach, I think, from the programming.
Yeah. Very
being
much
in Mexico
so.
plus all your high dose sessions, it makes that thing look so alien.
It really does. It just really makes no sense to me. I don't know.
Let's talk about it. The two richest guys in the world are building spaceships.
Right.
And the rest of them are building escape plans around climate change and the looming series of global catastrophes. So that's a big play for a lot of these folks. And then there's kind of more standard investors that are hoping that systems will stay in place and provide viable lives. But TBD. Vinay Gupta, who I'm pretty obsessed with, he is talking about how it's already happening now. People are no longer able to have permanent settlements. And there's going to be this whole permanent migrant class that could be within 40 years up to 1/7 of the population, if not more. So how do we get ready for this? Is it by getting $1 gazillion to protect yourself and have armed guards? That helps a little bit, but not really always. Or do we have to make other transitions? And how do we do that? And how do we make these decisions? A lot of people, the solution is get rich and hope the money sorts it out. So it's a psychological coping mechanism versus shifting. Because, how hopeful can we be when we start looking at the United States and the politics here? It's not great. So money is a solution for some people. I can't say it's the right solution, but I understand why they go that way. Hopefully that's helpful and it wasn't too confusing of a rant.
No, thank you,
It's a
Joe.
coping mechanism.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. And the money that they're putting into spaceships and into trying the drug development, what if that was put into fighting climate change? If we really wanted to do some of these deals, or we've just done the vaccine for COVID, and that was remarkable how quickly that happened, and the world really teamed up. And for a moment, then carbon emissions were going down because the world shut down. So we can do it if we have to, but it's better to do it before we kind of are on that cliff edge, teetering over. Let's try and do it now before things go really bad. And I was just reading about Florida. I know they've got a hurricane heading their way this week right now. But there's parts of Florida, I can't remember what they're called. It might be around the Everglades, I think.
It's a little early for hurricanes,
I was
right?
just thinking that already. Yeah. Gosh, oh God, the end is here, you guys.
Good luck, Florida. That's horrifying.
Oh no.
Yeah, there's the fifth named tropical storm of the year, and that's the earliest they've ever reached 5 in a year.
I'm not surprised.
But there's parts of Florida you can't get insurance or mortgages anymore, and towns are looking at evacuation plans because of this is just becoming uninhabitable.
And what does it say about
yeah.
our two richest people in the world that instead of investing money in maybe trying to solve climate change, they're just investing it in their own escape plan? Like, geez, it's like literally.
But is it really their escape plan? Because Mars isn't going to be fun to be a place, even for Musk to be.
True.
Within 100 years. It's going to be fucking horrible. That said, you know, we have sci-fi dystopias like Elysium or something. We've got a lot of books about this whole kind of thing. Yeah. So there's a lot here. And I don't love Musk, but I appreciate a couple things he's done with Solar City and Tesla, at least accelerating this transition away from there being so much petrol everywhere. I know batteries aren't, you know, the greatest, but I do think there's a strong argument for at times shifting away from this, you know, horrifying private ownership of vehicles thing. And what if we had automated vehicles and we could all own 1/10 of a vehicle instead of one vehicle, and we had it whenever we needed it? Like that's kind of where this goes when you look downstream. And you know, Tesla's goal was to just get the thing rolling, not to make a ton of money. And now we have every manufacturer working on this. So it did the trick. The documentary, What the Hell Happened to the Electric Car, has some really good gems in it.
I'll have to check that out.
And very similar. There's some stuff that really relates to this topic we've been talking about with patents and IP, like essentially like GM Ford buying up patents and burying them. Because it got in the way of their main business. And what about hemp instead of steel? Like we had really great hemp cars a while back. Let's do that again. All right. Well, we're coming close to the end, but I want to hit two more. Michelle, this peyote article from the Times. Can you talk about that one?
Yeah, so kind of related to climate change, there was this really beautiful photo essay in the New York Times, came out on July 5th. It was written by Robin Huang, and the photos are by Matt Reichel. And it's called Inside a Peyote Pilgrimage. And so these two journalists were invited to go on a pilgrimage with a Huichol family, a group. Basically, they go on like this week-long, or it could be longer, like walk to the desert to collect their medicine, their rites of passage, their peyote plants. And the text is actually kind of minimal. It has a lot of really educational information on like this way of life, but it's really worth checking out for the photos are really gorgeous. There's this one photo like of the indigenous group and in their traditional trajes, like their outfits, and they're really gorgeous. There's also this photo of all the peyote they collected. It was like 100 and something plants, and it's gorgeous. Oh, I want it like printed and framed in my house. It was really beautiful. But yeah, it's just like a really easy way to learn about, you know, the Huichol pilgrimages and the way of life, and just like where it starts and how it ends. And I just recommend folks checking it out. And it does talk about, you know, we've been talking about this a little on the podcast, how it is getting harder to find peyote. And part of that is climate change. Part of that is drug tourism. Part of that is like a lack of just kind of like respect, even though in Mexico, the peyote plants aren't supposed to be picked by non-indigenous groups, but I know they are because I see it on Facebook and stuff. People I know go up north and find them and take pictures, and I know they're picking them. And so I just ask folks, if you do find peyote in the wild, you should leave it. That would be the right thing to do. Other just interesting, they talk a little bit about different ceremonies and traditions in this group that were really fascinating and beautiful. Like there is a public confession ceremony that the group did right around midnight, where each person had to list all their past and present sexual relationships. Then the names were then publicly read around a bonfire, and the intention is to let go of the past. And there's just so many of these kinds of beautiful rituals in indigenous groups here in Mexico it's often like around their, ceremony with a psychedelic plant. This was kind of like to let go of their impurities. I know like actually sexual relations are very like considered like an impurity when it comes to working with psychedelic plants. I know it's the same with psilocybin mushrooms in Huautla. There are similar, like you have to abstain from sex and alcohol and meat for a week traditionally before you go enter, the mushroom ceremony. And it was just like a really beautiful way to start to learn about this totally different and foreign for us Westerners way of life and way of thinking about ceremony and psychedelics. So I just wanted to highlight it. I really loved it. I thought it was really well done.
Thanks for that. Kyle, did we at one point get to see some talk about the kind of pilgrimages and the Holy Triangle where they would kind of like do their annual kind of rites?
I think so. I mean, there was a documentary that I saw many years ago, but I think I forget her name off the top of my head. I have to go back in my notebooks or just look at the Horizon website. The woman that presented on peyote and the huichol and whatnot.
Oh,
I think
the anthropologist.
Yeah,
she's so amazing.
I think she kind of presented around that. That's maybe what you're thinking about, Joe.
I think so. Yeah, it was just fascinating. I loved seeing it. Like huichol pilgrims, and it's such an underdiscussed thing because we get so pigeonholed in thinking about drug development, research, neurons, and we totally forget that there's a cultural and religious tradition that's been around for much longer than the scientific method and pharmacology by a long shot, right? When did Francis Bacon kind of like bring that thing? The new organ, the novum organum. You're from England, David. Do you know much about this?
Francis Bacon. I know the name, but no.
He was a primary intellectual revolutionary that essentially said, hey, let's kind of quit repeating the things Aristotle said and say that's like the end of science. Aristotle had a great method, figured some things out, but the better our instrument, the better our knowledge. So let's figure out what some better tools are to develop, science. Francis Bacon's an incredible historical figure. So
BBC says he was born in 1516. So somewhere back then.
Yeah, this is like a really good transitional period, like from, Queen Elizabeth on to whoever was after, and like overlapped with Dr. John Dee, immediate predecessor to Isaac Newton. You just kind of smiled with John Dee. You know anything about John Dee?
I love that we're talking about English history, and I'm trying to think who was
so
after
pivotal,
Queen
man.
Elizabeth.
Help us, David.
I always forget. I was only focused on Elizabeth. Like that was my whole historical knowledge, and it's just a pivotal field. So, like, I'm actually going through this lecturer, deceased Daniel Robinson's important ideas or great ideas in psychology, and he has to start in ancient Greece and then move all the way forward. Of course. Witch burnings and possession have to come up as part of this because it was like part diagnosis and part spiritual. And what England was able to do is say, like, for a long time, the church, the Vatican, would respond and investigate miracles or weird things. And they shift it so the Royal Society would go on missions. So if a woman gave birth to a sheep, the Royal Society would go investigate as opposed to the church. And it was their best scientists of the day and philosophers of the day. So this was like a major traditional switch. I think this was after Bacon, though, like kind of more Newton era. I could be a little wrong on the timing, but this is when we said, okay, we need to do science better. We can do better than this and have better results. So let's do it. And that's the Royal Society in England was really important for that. I'm kind of an Anglophile, I guess. I suppose there was some interesting stuff happening in France at a similar time, but I just love Francis Bacon. I love Isaac Newton. I love this whole period of time because it was so transformational.
And I guess we're talking about the Renaissance as well. I don't know what years they were exactly, but
this is around Enlightenment, so very, very, very late stages of Renaissance, right? So it was like Renaissance, then Enlightenment with like Voltaire, and then like all this other kind of stuff kind of blew out. Like humanism came up to be a thing. It's kind of like a weird post-Christian kind of ethos of like, let's take care of everybody, which is interesting. Kind of harkens back to this kind of idea in Judaism of caring for the world. Can you remember the term, David?
Tikkun Olam. Yeah.
There it is. Right. Like it's kind of a weird circular thing. They had to like go back in history and bring it back in the kind of modern Christian West. Yeah. So weird currents, but I'm feeling quite sidetracked from what we were supposed to be talking about.
Peyote. I did find that talk. So it's on YouTube. Dr. Stacy Schaefer, called "Communing with the Gods: Peyote in the Life Cycle of Huichol Indians of Mexico."
It was so good. Can you include that in the show notes, Kyle?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah. Incredible talk. Changed my perspective on so much in an hour at Horizons. This is why these conferences are so good to go to, and you sit down at talks that you aren't that interested in. It's just...
Yeah.
Jim Fadiman said he looks at a schedule and finds the talk that is least interesting to him, in fact, kind of repulsive, and he goes to it. And usually his mind has changed quite substantially.
That's a good way to go about it. I will say that a lot of the Horizons talks, like 6 months after the conference, are posted on YouTube, so folks can go back and check those out. There's so much valuable information and presentations in there. And I do think they're trying to do a Horizons this year in New York in December. We'll see how that pans out. Yeah.
Yep. That's on my calendar. I hope majority of us can meet up there.
Ooh, that'd be fun.
Something to look forward to. I wanted to share a couple of quick things about this. So just seeing photographs was just so lovely because we read a lot of things, a lot of words, and we were just talking about IP and molecules and lawyers and policy. So literally just a picture paints 1,000 words. So just to see these photos of people living their life, this is their way of life in beautifully natural ways. So it was a great honor that the writer and the photographer could join them. And you could see as well the experience that they had on this pilgrimage. You know, they were in the baking hot sun for a week. They were staying up late. They were harvesting around thorns. It was hard work. Yeah. And so it makes me think about, we're looking at these Comp 360 bells in very sanitized settings with stainless steel and lights. And, we're looking at patenting the types of furnishings we've got. These people are working really hard and they're getting cut by thorns and they're kind of in the bushes trying to identify the right cactus. But at the same time, they're doing it as a group, as a community, and it's a ritual, it's a rite of passage. This is something they do every year. So it's being handed down from the elders to the young people in their community. So I would love us to have that kind of experience. So instead of just this people taking a psychedelic and having this trip, it's actually something that, it's got this kind of ritual, rite of passage, kind of more cultural elders involvement as well. And then we have to kind of earn the sacred right to experience these things. So it really underpinned that for me, which is lovely and a bit different to most articles.
Yeah, same. Thank you for sharing that. So true. There is something really special about foraging your own medicine. I've only done it recently for the first time, and it was such a deeper experience to, eat mushrooms that I picked myself, that my friend showed me, his patch where they grow that he knows. It was such an intimate and beautiful experience that I do hope that I would love to see more of that personally than more, patented in synthetic psychedelics and sterile offices. Like, there's a place for that. Like I keep saying, it should be an option. I would love to I don't know, get more people involved in learning to identify mushrooms and learning to just forge a deeper relationship with their psychedelics and their medicine, I think is really important for how these things work. Because when you just buy it from someone and just take it at a concert, it can be fun and powerful. But there's something about ritualizing it, however you do it as an individual, that really makes it a deeper experience.
Yeah, it makes me wonder just, I guess, how that might bring meaning and purpose into our lives. I'm just thinking about, just eco-psychology in general, and thinking about like, people going on pilgrimages and, being connected to their landscape. There's like a myth or a narrative behind it. It gives them like a sense of purpose and being in the world. And yeah, just maybe sometimes that lacks from our culture. I mean, sometimes maybe people have it depending on their religious background and what narratives and stuff that they live by. But, I'm just making a generalization here of how, many people in Western cultures, we don't have that. We lack rites of passages. We're not connected to the land and our landscapes as much as maybe we used to be. Again, just coming back to like ethnobotany and family ethnobotany, like even just bringing it back to what type of plants are in your family? Do you understand like your relationship to plants? What did you grow anything? Did your parents grow anything? Did your grandparents grow anything? And just, that relationship to the natural world and landscape and how that can bring meaning to us at times.
I just want to plug, we have a great article coming in on the blog in a week or two about contemporary rites of passage. And the author makes an argument that perhaps part of our depression and addiction epidemics in the West is a result of like a lack of that meaning. I think a lot of folks who struggle with depression, if it's more of like a existential form of depression, they probably lack motive and meaning and drive in their lives. And just what different communities and activities and stuff can help us as like a modern world. I'm really excited for this one. I will keep it shut until I'm ready to publish it, but it's really great.
Yeah, me too. And I was just on that chat between Christian Angermeyer and Rick Doblin. And Rick Doblin was saying, I had my bar mitzvah and I thought I was going to be a man afterwards, but I wasn't. And it wasn't until I got into psychedelics that I really started to explore, what are, who am I? And what does it mean to be a man?
That's like me in front of the mirror on 5 grams. Like, who am I? It's just like what you got to just dissect sometimes. What is your purpose? Yeah. What are you doing here? Why? I don't think a lot of us stop and think about that. And psychedelics can help, but other things can help too.
And even without psychedelics, sometimes just looking in the mirror for like a couple minutes.
Yeah.
So I used to be quite strong into my Buddhism. And there was some meditations where you literally just stare into the mirror for an hour and crazy things happen without any psychedelics.
That's such a good point.
Just your face and this whole concept of self and going into that kind of transpersonal realm, just see beyond our skin and our bone and our, there's so much more there. And rites of passages help us to see beyond this sense of self. And it's empowering, but also scary.
I love that. Thank you, David. Oh my goodness.
Right. And, eye gazing into somebody's eyes, that's a long time practice that a lot of religious groups use, Buddhist and otherwise, cults too.
I think I had to do that at a mushroom retreat. It has a strong
effect.
That's hard. I hated that activity, but I did it anyway.
Yeah.
It's good. It's good to try. I don't know what I think of it long term, but I definitely know it at least does interesting things.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's there's a lot to say. I guess let's talk about this last one. I'm excited. Hopkins at hopkinspsychedelic.org/ad survey. The primary question: have you taken psychedelic mushrooms during or after treatment with an antidepressant? So Hopkins is asking that you participate in a 10 to 30 minute survey, totally anonymous. PI is on the study, principal investigator is Roland Griffiths. And you can read all about it on the site. We'll have links to it. But I think this is a great thing to look at. What happens when you have mushrooms? If you have like pretty normal amounts of SSRIs in your blood, what happens as you're withdrawing? What happens as you like just first start taking it? There are a lot of things here to discuss. And I think there's going to be some really cool findings from this study. So you can participate. And it's just great that people can participate in these studies from home, right? Like, how cheap does this make science? I love that science can be this inexpensive. Yeah, I'm sure they're using some wildly expensive stuff and have a lot of staff, but the fact that they can execute on this without having to pull people into a lab, very specific populations into a lab, flying them, hoteling them, all that. It's amazing. So can't wait to see what happens there.
This
Michelle?
is so important and so interesting. And I'm really excited for the results of this because so many people ask me this and I don't have a good answer. Like, I think maybe it could be a little dangerous. I think mostly from experience, you don't really feel it when you're on the medication and you take a psychedelic. I've been with a lot of friends and they take the same dose, but they're on an SSRI and they don't really trip. But I think the biggest problem in the community is folks getting off of their meds in like quick ways, or even if they taper off in the appropriate way and then they get really depressed or their mood changes drastically and then they go into a psychedelic experience. We have an article in the blog coming out about this in a month or two as well, because I have a doctor who wants to argue that, yeah, like getting off your meds might not be the best way to like chase the next ceremony. There is this kind of thing happening in psychedelic communities and depressed folks who, yeah, they are interacting with psychedelics and SSRIs in not the healthiest way. So to get some actual data on this from Johns Hopkins will be so critical and crucial. And I appreciate them putting this survey together for sure.
Totally. David, any good observations from this one or thoughts?
I think it's much needed. You know, there's a lot of people on antidepressants, so we need to know this question because psilocybin is going to be reclassified pretty soon, you know, within a couple of years. So we need to know this question because I get asked it all the time. So does Michelle. She was just saying we all do.
Yeah.
So we need to know, you know, I think it's the serotonin syndrome that people are worried about.
Yeah.
And antidepressants are tough to withdraw from. So, you know, yes, there's alcohol and caffeine withdrawal. There's also withdrawal from benzos for anxiety and SSRIs for depression, so that they're difficult to withdraw from. So people might not want to do that in order to do, say, a psilocybin treatment. So the more information we have, the better. So from a harm reduction perspective, this is really important, as well as kind of developing clinical practice guidelines. We simply have to know these questions. And going back to the whole patent thing and the IP thing, this isn't something that someone's going to patent. This is all about public health.
Yeah.
And making sure that this is going to be available, maximizing access, and it's going to have successful outcomes for people. And so, yeah, really good to see.
Cool. Kyle?
No, just kind of echo everything that everybody else has said. But talking about patents, just thinking like, yeah, figuring out the mechanism there. And then what if you were able to create a new psychedelic that could interact with people on SSRIs or something like that? There's a patent somebody could grab.
Let's do it, you guys. I'm just kidding.
Right. Yeah, it's so interesting. It's so interesting. I'm reminded of the time I had to provide a client in Jamaica 14 grams of mushrooms before feeling any effect due to psychiatric meds getting in the way. And this person still had a pretty positive experience and a positive tale, like got a lot of growth. So what does that mean? How harmful are these SSRIs, SNRIs, et cetera? Is it overblown sometimes?
I know.
Do people kind of project onto it in really weird ways? Like this whole thing, like all of my receptors are broken. I'm never going to get better. I've heard this a number of times. Really desperate people, unfortunately. And is it the meds? Is it not? It's hard for doctors to even spend time having those conversations and figuring it out, right? So the way we do medicine's pretty savage sometimes, and we could do better. Yeah. Anyway, I think that's it for now. Please do participate in that Hopkins study. If you are a candidate, please, please, please. And anything else going on? There's that holotropic breathwork study that Malene and Robin Carhart-Harris, Malene Uthaug, I think it's tied to Imperial. That's a really cool one. You can find links on our welcome page, psychedelicstoday.com/welcome. And in our newsletter, we try to include links to research you can participate in. So always check those out if you're up for that. Any closing thoughts from anybody before I wrap it up?
Thanks for listening.
Yeah. Longer one.
Been a blast. Thanks for having me. I hope
fun having you on, David.
You're probably going to get invited back, David.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, cool. Yeah. Thank you all for tuning in. Hope this one wasn't too long. Hour 20, not that bad. And what do we have coming up? Yeah. Navigating Psychedelics, July 22. Learn more, psychedelicstoday.com or, oh my goodness. I'll remember the website someday, psychedeliceducationcenter.com. And, 8-week program, ton of material, highly valuable, and it'll help you understand where you want to go. A navigation tool for your future and how you might want to serve your clients. We have a lot of people using psychedelics outside of a clinical context, and they're probably going to need, well, not probably, a lot of them are going to need therapists. So are you ready? Are you a doctor that doesn't really understand these drugs yet? And you're seeing people in your annual physicals that, okay, you did 30 ayahuasca sessions this year. What kind of advice should I give you? You don't know yet. Like, I'll give you a shortcut, tell them to slow down, but come to our class and you can learn more about how to really approach these clients, patients, and more in safe, compassionate ways and help people grow. Yeah. So I think that's it for now. Thank you all for tuning in. This is Joe Moore and the rest of the team signing off. We'll see you on the next episode. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye, guys.